What does it mean to be independent? Truly independent. Not on a corporate retreat and using words to talk about words, saying things like independence, but then also forcing to conform. What is it to be truly independent? So words are powerful and words have meaning, but words do not imbue the substance of the thing. The word alone doesn't do it. It's the action, it's the spirit of the thing. So what is it to be truly independent? And what's more, what does it take to remain independent despite pressures on all sides to cave in to various different systems and belief? If you don't have your own dream, if you don't have your own plan, then typically you become part of someone else's dream, you become part of someone else's plan. So the answer is that it's difficult. It's difficult work to be and remain independent. It's hard. It requires sacrifice. It requires a fierce determination and perseverance. It requires sisu. Sometimes to be independent means to be fierce. And this is important. Not vicious, but fierce. There is a very, very important difference. Not vicious, but fierce. It is to sometimes feel lost, targeted, isolated, shadow banned, algorithmically fucked, frustrated, and ultimately, what it means to be independent is it means that you are truly free, actually free. You embody freedom. You are independent. You embody freedom. And that doesn't mean that you become like a selfish asshole, and I have to tell myself this all the time. I'm a Leo. I have selfish asshole tendencies. Also, my ancestors were the Vikings who, let's face it, they trafficked people and they did some fucked up stuff, right? But to be truly independently free, that's my working goal, my working dream, my working purpose. And for me, freedom also is tied up with like the good things in life, like freedom, justice, beauty, love, always trying to excavate these things within myself too, keep them in the forefront. We are so flawed, all of us so flawed, everything is flawed, but to remain independent, that is, for me personally, very, very important. And Magic Mind helps me to do that. Magic Mind helps me to do that. Magic Mind has sponsored my show, which I really appreciate, and Magic Mind is an awesome product. Magic Mind has so many good things inside of it. I've said this before, I feel like this product precipitated directly from my own personal adaptogenic and neurotropic wish list. It's got components, delicious, delectable, and high-octane components such as lion's mane, which is my personal favorite, and not just mine, but also Paul Stamets's personal favorite non-psychoactive fungal ally, lion's mane. It's got rhodiola for clarity. It's got bacopa for focus and calm. And it's got ashwagandha, which is very powerful. And my ashwagandha that I planted under the sacred ironwood tree is doing well because we were blessed with some rains. It rained in the barrio, and I've been watering it as well. And I know. There's a mycelial mat now between the mother tree of the sacred ironwood and the little ashwagandha baby plant. And they're working together now, and the ashwagandha is looking really good. That makes me very happy. Magic Mind has ashwagandha, Magic Mind has cordyceps. So Magic Mind is essentially the nectar of the content creator gods. That's what I'm saying. And for me, that means like, I do worship multiple gods, and I worship the sun, I worship some other goddesses, I worship goddesses, I worship gods. And it's interesting, like sometimes goddesses, they don't want you to like run around piping off the names of everything because they're a little bit like low key, so I'm gonna respect that. But Mother Earth, Madre Tierra, these are powerful forces, very, very, very powerful forces. And in the American Southwest, there are very powerful forces at work, and I love them all. And anyone who tries to say like, oh, this is the god of the desert, of all the desert, is bullshitting, because different deserts have different gods. And anyways, I'm getting sidetracked here. Magic Mind is the nectar of the content creator goddesses and gods. It is my personal nectar of creation. It helps me a lot. It helps me to stay focused. It helps me to stay calm. It helps me to feel supported because they've sponsored the show, and I really, really appreciate that. And they allow me to remain independent, which I really, really appreciate. And they're very nice to me, which I also very, very appreciate. Because, like, there's nice and then there's nice, right? Like, you can be polite and mean. Magic Mind is nice. They're kind. They care. They're thoughtful. And I really appreciate that. So please consider supporting Magic Mind. Consider supporting the Barbarian Noetics podcast. And you can get 20% off at checkout. 20% off at checkout when you use the code BarbarianPod20. That's BarbarianPod20 at checkout for 20% off. Get it in ya. Get into it. Give it a shot. It's a good product. So you can add it to smoothies and stuff like that too. Like, I like the taste, so I'll chug that stuff, right? Because I like it. But if you are like, oh, the cordyceps tastes a certain kind of way or whatever, add it to a smoothie, add it to a juice, do whatever, be creative. Get it in ya, because it's good stuff and it's a good company. So Magic Mind, thank you all. Thank you to my sponsor. Thank you to my listeners. I love everybody. I love all humans. I truly do. All humans have beautiful cultures. All humans have beauty within them. And we just have to excavate the beauty within all of our cultures and then find the overlap where all of the beauty can overlap together. And we don't have to be fighting. We can be loving and sharing and bartering. And then if you want to have like ritual, like we can do like ritual warfare stuff in the form of sports. I think that makes sense. Ritual warfare in the form of sports, where you have people who want to compete, they want to test their skills. We can do it. We can test the skills, and it can be intense. You know, like rugby is fucking intense. Like rugby, you can get hurt playing rugby, but it's like a test of skill, and everyone is doing it consensually, and so it's beautiful. So that's it, and that's that, everybody. Let's go ahead and get into the show. I love you all. Peace. MagicMind.com, BarbarianPod20 at checkout. Magic Mind. I love my Magic Mind. I love my Magic Mind. My Magic Mind makes me happy. My Magic Mind makes me feel free. Magic Mind, BarbarianPod20 at checkout. What is up to my Dragonfly dreamers and purposeful porpoises, not purposeful purposes. But why not? What's up to my purposeful purposes out there? You beautiful purposes, you. I love all of y'all. Purple, purposeful porpoises. Whew! That right there is a tongue jujitsuer. Anyways, little Raven here. And I'm straight kicking it, just straight chilling in the barrio. It's Saturday evening, early Saturday evening. The days are getting longer, but the days are still short. So the sun is going down already, but I was able to stand in the sunshine with my kettlebell and my ball and chain and listen to some Cumbia. So I got my photosynthesis in for the day. Feeling healthy, feeling strong, feeling good. Admittedly, I was a little bit down in the dumps for a while, but it's life. It's life. Sometimes you get down in the dumps and then you just got to pull yourself out of it. And seems like that might be just like the way it is, like for this lifetime. I don't know. Like you can only recognize the light through the contrast with the darkness. You can only recognize happiness through contrast with the down in the dumps. I don't know. But I have pulled myself out of it, and I'll say this. I believe that when one connects with the activities of one's ancestors, one derives power. So like my ancestors loved the alternation between hot and cold. So like there's that Finnish tradition of you drill a hole in the winter, you drill a hole in the lake, and you friggin' jump in the frozen lake, and then you go in the hot sauna. And I don't have access to a frozen lake because I am a desert dweller, but I do have access to cold pools because there's lots of pools that are unheated in the valley. And then there's hot tubs, which is not a sauna, but it's similar. So last night, I alternated, and I believe it's called hydrotherapy. A naturopathic friend of mine, what's up, Dr. Carmo? A naturopathic friend of mine told me once about hydrotherapy, and it's the alternation between hot and cold water, and apparently it's very good for you. And I will say that it really helped me to feel good in my body and in my soul to alternate between the really, really cold winter pool, and this is at night, so it's like 52 degrees, so it's like, you know, I mean, yeah, I get it. All you Midwesterners out there and East Coasterners are like, 52 degrees? What the fuck you talking about, little Raven? It's negative 30 here. But for me, it feels cold still, and you know, there's no sun, so 52 degrees and a little breeze and no sun, it's chilly. And then the pool is like cold as fuck because it's unheated. And then you alternate between that and then the nice hot tub, hot tub, and very invigorating, very invigorating. So for what it's worth, I think, and you know, everyone's ancestry is different, so, but lean into your ancestry, find out what your ancestors did to feel good, and then emulate that behavior, and then I think it helps one to feel good. That's been my experience anyway, so for what it's worth. And I hope everyone had a festive, joyous holiday, however they celebrated the holiday. I am a sun worshiper, so I celebrate the winter solstice. I also am down with Jesus, so I celebrate Christmas. And I'm also down with the New Year, but although I'm more of a fan of the Zuni and Hopi tradition that the New Year starts on the winter solstice, because that's when the days start getting longer. But it's all semantics, you know. I mean, any excuse to have a celebration and a party, I think, is legit. And as I'm older, and I don't know if I'm older and wiser, but I'm older, I have less of a desire to like run around and try to find, like pay $20 for a cover and then listen to like some music that has a 30% chance of being mediocre and then dance around with a bunch of people and getting drunk, because I don't drink no more. So it's like, since I don't drink no more, it kind of sucks to like hang out when it's just all about the alcohol. That said, like if I'm in like a small circle of loved ones and friends and mi amor, like everyone can drink around me, it don't bother me, but it's just like, I'm not gonna pay $20 to go into a thing where everyone's getting drunk and then the 30% chance the music's not that great, and you know, what are we doing here? So my Christmas was more familia oriented, and lit off some fireworks. I had some good New Mexico fireworks, which are quality, legit, you know. I mean, yeah, they're not, maybe not the craziest fireworks in the world, but you need like the what is it called, the mortar, I don't know, you shoot up and they explode in lots of pretty colors, and loud, and it's pretty cool. And here on the south and west side, people don't realize this in the suburbs, but there's a lot of Air Force bases and shit like that around the valley, and the helicopter pilots practice their urban warfare. They practice urban warfare maneuvers in the south and west side, the ghetto birds or whatever. And that's why they're, one of the reasons I think why they're always like swooping over my apartment, and fucking the helicopters are flying super low all the time. And it's like, all right, like whatever, you know, I just, please don't shoot me with a Hellfire missile. But I guess you got to do what you got to do. But I also have to do what I got to do. So I got to light, it's Christmas. I'm celebrating the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, and I'm lighting off some fireworks. And this helicopter pilot decides to just like make a beeline for my explosions. And I'm like, well, I was here first with my explosions, and I'm celebrating the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. And if you decide to fly directly into my explosions, like that is not my fault, sir, ma'am. I don't know whether it was a gentleman or a lady, or, you know, who the fuck cares anyways. I do believe that it's pretty fluid. I know this might be triggering to some people, but we have, every man has an inner woman, every woman has an inner man. It's a yin yang. There's the two spirits in the indigenous tradition. Like, so, I mean, whatever. The pilot decided to make a beeline for my explosions, and I'm like, dog, that's your fight. That's your fight. Like, I'm just I'm celebrating the birth of Jesus, and you're flying your helicopter directly into my New Mexico fireworks. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Luckily, all's well that ends well. No one got shot with a Hellfire missile. Nobody died. I didn't blow off any fingers. I am very safe with my fireworks. I do not take risks with fireworks. So fireworks are like firearms. So it's like with great power comes great responsibility. I don't do stupid shit with fireworks. I'm very careful. Like, I'm, as careful as you can be. There's a risk, but I'm careful with fireworks, and it was a lot of fun. Pozole on Christmas is where it's at. That is going to be my new thing now. Pozole on Christmas. And mi amor pointed out that sometimes on Christmas or around Christmas, you'll be driving around on the south and west side, and there'll be a car in front of you, and it'll be going like 5 miles an hour on like a street where it's like 35 miles an hour. And they'll just be like going 5 miles an hour and then like stopping and then going 5. And it's like, is this person on sedatives or what's the deal? Apparently, no. There's a good chance that they have a bowl of pozole. So they have a bowl of pozole, and when you have a bowl of soup in a car, you can't go very fast, because otherwise you're going to spill the soup all over the fucking place. It's going to be a mess. So just a heads up, it's around the winter solstice, Christmas time, and people are driving 5 miles an hour for some reason. Don't get mad. Just maybe drive around them, and I don't know. I mean, if you're... I don't know. I was going to say, like, maybe see if you can get some pozole, but that might be a little bit forward. Maybe make your own pozole. Make your own pozole, and then you can also drive 5 miles an hour, and it'll be all good. So here I am, and I'm very excited for this episode. Very, very excited for this episode. So my feature for this episode is a very good brother from another mother, and a very good man, and a very powerful man, and someone I adore, someone I'm learning a lot from, and someone who is helping a lot of people and helping me, and just an amazing person. His name is Dusty Don Drake. Dusty Don Drake. And Dusty Don Drake has an amazing website, so check it out. It is dondrake.energy. So dondrake.energy is the website. And you can learn all about his work and him and everything, but from his About Me section, he says, I practice various forms of advanced transformational energy and spiritual work, but I have a background as a firefighter, ski instructor, and veteran. Graduated from West Point with a mechanical engineering degree and an MBA, and had a successful career as a business executive before the universe called me through a series of deep spiritual awakenings to lay down my identity and dedicate my life to spiritual evolution. So I just find that a very beautiful life path. I value this man immensely. I'm very excited to share. We have multiple conversations that will be releasing on the feed with Dusty Don. So this is the first one. So it's an introduction to the magnificent Dusty Don Drake. Check out his website, dondrake.energy. In the description, I did let him know, like, hey, if there's any other links or projects or anything you want me to highlight, I'm going to have them in the description. So check out the description of the app. It'll have all the juicy details, but you can find out a lot about Dusty Don and how to get in contact with him and all that stuff on his website, dondrake.energy. And this episode, we recorded a little minute ago, but time is fluid and elastic, and it just everything happens the way it happens. Like, I'm gonna be running skits about Christmas. It's gonna be like February 15th, and I'm still gonna be running cold opens about Christmas because I'm a procrastinator. I don't know what to tell you. I do the best I can, but I'm trying to live my life, trying to keep a roof over my head, and I'm trying to have a good time, and I'm trying to stave off depression, and I'm being a purposeful porpoise over here. So it is what it is. And this conversation, we talk about activating one's energy, really taking sovereignty over one's energetic body, and really embodying what it means to be a human being fully. We are magnificent. Human beings are fucking powerful. We are very, very powerful. And I don't mean that from like an egotistical sense of like, oh, I'm the shit and fucking it's the secret and I can manifest $1 million and it'll land on my door. It's like, it's possible you could do that. It's possible you could manifest $1 million and it could land on your door, because miracles are possible and I believe in anything. But I think more importantly is like, the power of our bodies and the power of our spirits. We are transmutational beings, and we're able to like really achieve a lot. And if we give ourselves like good food, good nutritious food, and we work with our allies in the plant and fungal and animal kingdoms, and human animals as well, so we're working together in a fungal mycelial nature, and we're deriving power, and we're sharing benefits and sharing alkaloids and all that kind of stuff. Our immune systems are friggin' profound. There's like 7 or 8 different types of immune cells. They're communicating with nanotechnic it's not technic at all. It's nanobio, chemical, electrical signaling, and there's all sorts of communication happening, all sorts of like, okay, let's figure this out. Let's take this, let's use this for that and do this for that. It's very complex, and we have to respect it. You don't have to do anything, friends. You have free will. So, but I encourage everybody to respect the power of their bodies and how much we can do, how much self-healing we can do, how much healing of others, how much healing of the world. And I'm in the business of doing my part to heal the world's soul and bring about the new world, the new earth, which is a beautiful place. I believe that there's a golden age upon us. I believe that we're in the Kali Yuga. I believe we're in the time of the tribulations, and I believe that a new earth with new beautiful possibilities of much less dropping missiles on babies and much more working together and bartering and trading. And if you're gonna want to have some conflict, because young people, and I say young people here because women are warriors, women are tough as fuck, women have strong lower bodies. And in wrestling and jiu-jitsu, the lower body is like, that's where it's at. So women are fucking very tough, very powerful. In the Celtic tradition, the women fought. In the Viking tradition, the women fought. In the Azteca and Mexica tradition, the women fought. The Apache women fought. The Apache women, if you are an enemy, whether you're a white man or another indigenous like group that has beef with the Apache, and you slaughter or kill their man, they are going to hunt you down. The Apache women are going to hunt you down. So, you know, and I think that's a beautiful, powerful thing, and I love everybody, and I lost my train of thought a little bit, but that's okay. So I'm here with Dusty Don Drake. Love this man, love what he stands for, love his energy, love his vibe. Thankful for this man because he's helped me a lot, work through some stuff, helped me with my depression, my bouts with depression periodically, my bouts with anxiety periodically. And he works on an energetic and spiritual frequency, which I really appreciate because I'm personally on a journey of leaning away from my pharmaceutical mood stabilizers and leaning in towards my fungal, medicinal, and plant mood elevators and mood activators, and also the spirit world and the energy and the energy of my chakras, and working with that system to make myself feel good. Because we all just want to feel good at the end of the day, and Dusty Don is here to help us do that. So let's go ahead and get into this episode. I love all y'all. And before I forget, Dusty Don asked me to let folks know as well that he is an energy healer, that he does one-on-one sessions, as well as group sessions and online sessions. So definitely get in touch with Dusty Don Drake. Only good things will ensue. This man is amazing. And without further ado, let's get into the interview, the first of many with this beautiful soul. I hope you enjoy. I love you all. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. All the support links are in the description. The Barbarian Noetics podcast is completely listener supported, so I can't really use your support. The direct donate links are the best, either PayPal or Cash App. That's really the best. But you can also become a patron. You can do Buy Me a Coffee. There's so many ways to support. And pick up a bottle of Magic Mind while you're at it. Use code BarbarianPod20 at checkout. And that's it, and that's that. Let's get into this episode, everybody. Let's go.
Y es otra noche llorándote. Y son las cosas que no dije. Y sé que el tiempo no me deja más y no me deja verte. Me está poder tenerte igual y no te miento, duele. Y es otra noche llorándote y son las cosas que no dije y sé que el tiempo no me deja, no me deja verte, me está matando no poder tenerte igual y no te miento, duele. Y que somos tal para cual tú no puedes negarlo, siente lo mismo que yo, así que dale mambo. Si no tienes tiempo para mí, yo no tengo tiempo para ti. Búscate otra que se busque, papito, con tu reclamo. Hazlo, tú me tienes psycho. Luco para arriba, papi, luco para abajo. Busco la salida, no encuentro nada más. Solo sabe la luna donde quiero llegar. Y es otra noche que paso pensando que tú no estarás con la otra. Y me duele en el pecho saber que te...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Barbarian Noetics podcast. I am nestled in the barbarian lair today, feeling very comfortable, cozy, and happy. Got my AC, friggin' doing work in South Phoenix. It's 109 degrees outside, and I'm sitting, just came out of a brief meditation actually with my good brother, who I just met but feel like I have known you for a very long time. And
Lifetime, baby.
perhaps. And so do you go by Dusty Don Drake?
I go by Dusty or Don. Most people call me Dusty.
I really like Dusty Don.
Oh, you
Like,
can
I
do that
really-
too. Let's go by Dusty Don. The funny story behind that is I actually legally changed my name to Dusty Don Drake. It used to be something else, but Don Drake was part of it. And I asked my stepson, who originally started calling me that, I was like, why do you call me Dusty? And he's like, well, the first time I met you, I noticed your beard had some dust in it, and I got some gray in there. So I was like, all right, fair enough.
Yeah,
Dusty
I'm
Don
happy.
Drake.
I'm happy with my gray beard. You know what I'm saying?
right.
Like, I feel like we were speaking off mic a little bit, getting to know each other and stuff, and I
Yeah.
do feel like I've been given a second chance at life, you know? Like,
Yeah.
boom, we're gonna start this thing off friggin' hard in the paint, because people know, if you're a Barbarian
Yep.
Noetics podcast person, you know about my history and stuff. I'm lucky to be here. And like I do feel like I got a second chance at life. And
Yeah.
like when things start to align, the only word to describe it is magical.
Yes.
There's a certain flow and a feel to things, and you feel it in your chakral system, you feel it up and down your spine. It
Goosebumps.
energizes,
Up.
activating, energizing. And so I am going to ask you to introduce yourself, of course, but what we're going to be talking about today, I feel, is going to revolve around this idea of activation. I think that's what we're going to be ending up discussing a lot today.
Yes.
So Dusty Don Drake, my brother, I'm so glad I finally met you in this life or whatever. But like, you know, it's I think for a lot of people right now, a lot of people are feeling that it is a challenging time, and a lot of people are feeling stretched, and a lot of people
Yeah.
are in a state of, we're really like, we're holding it together, but we're stretched. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of power in that. Like when you're feeling stretched, there's a lot of power because neuroplasticity and like the way that plants and trees grow, there's a certain strength that comes from stress.
Yes.
But that's like the productive and the positive aspect of it. And it's something that you feel like in your heart, in your soul, and up and down your spine. Like this is a visceral feeling, you know, when it's real.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so I mean, you know, I also said this off mic, everybody, but I'm like genuinely very thankful for this session right now, because to be honest, needed it. Like needed a little help, like with managing all the emotions and all the energy, you know, like managing all the energy from all the people that I love in my immediate circle, and then in my neighborhood, in my city. When I go bike riding, I see the homeless encampments, they're getting bigger. These are beautiful souls just trying to, doing the best, very best they can. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So a lot
Yeah.
of people are feeling like stretched. And so now it's time. It's like, all right, it's time. It's time to like ground in, strengthen, make sure that we're like vitalized. So I think that's what we're going to be discussing a little bit. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, for my beloved listeners, the barbarian lair heads, please introduce yourself, Dusty Don, and let folks know a little bit about like where you come from and what you're up to.
Hey, and I appreciate it, man. And this came at a really good time for me too. I mean, I'm growing my healing practice now. I've been doing it for a long time, but part of me, I'll give you my background, then we'll talk a little bit more about that. So originally I grew up in Pennsylvania, like we were talking about. I spent a lot of time out in the woods and in nature, loved all the stories of mythical and magical beings. We were talking about magic. So the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Greek gods, the Roman gods, the Arthurian legends, anything that had to do with that. I had this sense all through growing up that there is something out there, that there's magic out there. At the same time, I was brought up in a super fundamentalist background where we were not even supposed to go to movies or like anything that could influence us away from the certain belief and doctrine of the church. We were supposed to avoid that so we wouldn't get entrapped. I grew up, I ended up going to school at West Point, the United States Military Academy. I thought I wanted a career in the military. And then I got in and I thought, I don't want a career in the military. I didn't like being this like strict conformist and doing things just because that's how we do them. Like if that's your justification for something for me, I'm like, I gotta, I want to go deep. Like what's the why here? The real why. So I got out of the military. I went back to school. I got my MBA and worked in oil and gas banking. Later, I went on to be a CFO and then a CEO. I actually, while I was going through my shamanic training, was in oil and gas. I ran an oil and gas company and people were like, how can you do that? And I was like, that is a really good question. And that as I sat with that, the answer that came is, all right, if we're showing respect for Pachamama, Mother Earth, and respectfully asking for her oil and respectfully drilling and not making a mess, and we're doing it in an honoring way, she'll let us do that if we honor her. And so I did that for a while. And energy wise, growing up, I had a lot of PTSD from childhood. My dad and I have since reconciled, but I've had probably 8 concussions, a lot of physical abuse, and that caused me depression, anxiety, suffering, suicidal thoughts and ideations. I knew I never would act on them, but those thoughts were there sometimes. Like, you're not worthy. Like you should just hit the reset button. Never would do it, but those were there. And that caused me to seek. And it reminds me of what you were talking about with this stretching, right? Like that stretching, that tension, that stress, that uncomfortability causes us to seek. So I started seeking. I did a lot of talk therapy. I was trained in Reiki 1, 2, and 3 because I used to work with my animals. And I said, all I know how to do is hold on to them and say, I love you. I love you. I love you. My teacher was like, well, you're basically doing Reiki already. So come get an attunement, which is that activation, right?
Yeah.
And that led me down the path of then working with a shaman, working with our animals, and her energy was strong enough that it knocked me out. Not totally out, but I mean, I fell asleep. So we got talking. I started having some really lucid dreams. And after one of them in particular, it was very powerful, where I saw myself get devoured by a white wolf. And I actually stood up and let it happen willingly, like let it tear me apart. She said, you just got the call. If you desire to follow this path, I'll teach you, but just know it's going to change a lot of things in your life and your life may fall apart. And in a lot of ways it did. I ended up leaving the corporate world in 2018 because the universe made it really clear that I was done with that. And my heart really desired to follow the healing path. So I went through a very amicable divorce after 20 years, moved to far Northern California, lived in the woods out there, had some really amazing experiences, and ended up going to a spiritual retreat where I sat next to the beautiful woman who is now my wife 5 years later. So it's just the way that Source weaves these things together, stuff that made no sense at the time, right? But I always had hope. I always had like faith that there was something bigger and believed in the magic, and magic happens. And that brought me to where I am today, where I do some work on a farm part-time, but I'm really growing my healing practice because the stuff is powerful and I think we all need it. And we can all do it too. I just happen to have the 20 years of experience and all of that stuff that built me into the position where I am today, where I want to teach, I want to speak, I want to go out there and talk with people, myself included, who are like stretched, who are feeling the intensity of what's going on right now. And that led me to talking with Christina, and that brought me to sitting here with my beautiful brother today.
Yeah. Wow. Your journey is absolutely fascinating. Very unique. Extremely unique journey. It reminds me a lot about the unity of the opposites and like the yin yang. So when we were
Yes.
discussing like what are we going to talk about? Because we knew we got to talk. We knew we had to talk.
Yeah.
What are we going to
Yeah.
talk about? It was almost like that was like the afterthought. Like what we actually talk about is like
Right.
the afterthought of it. So we're talking about like the flow of the,
Yes.
I love Taoism. There's all sorts of other ways of talking about it, but like the flow of the universe. And so that symbol of the yin yang, where you have like, the snake eating its own tail, the 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 little like dark, the little white ball of light in the
Yes.
darkness that's
Yes.
chasing its opposite, but they are actually, it is all one ball, one sphere. So
Yes.
like it just reminds me of that with your journey into energy work, shamanism and healing came via like the oil and gas situation,
Right.
which is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And I find that like when you were speaking, it felt true to me what you were saying, that like that Pachamama will actually allow if we need to drill for the oil, but we have
Yeah.
to do it in a way that is like very conscious, and we can't leave a mess, and it has to be
Yeah.
respectful, and like, and that makes so much sense to me. It makes so much sense.
And when we have that respect for the earth, not to get into like vegetarianism versus eating meat and stuff like that. But in the Native American tradition, we were talking about that off camera, about the strong feeling and the pull that I have towards the Native Americans and their land. When they would hunt buffalo or when they would hunt a deer, they did that very respectfully. They would offer prayers, and they would have a whole setup that they did before they went out in search of meat. And a lot of times when they got to the place where they were going to hunt and shoot an animal with their bow and arrow, they would say a prayer, and one of the buffalo or one of the deer would just stand up and stop and look at them and offer itself.
Wow.
And it wouldn't try to run away. And it was like source, because they approached it respectfully in the circle of life, the yin yang, the Ouroboros, the dragon eating its tail. The animal yielded itself to sustain life and realized, that's what I'm here for right now in this moment.
Wow, that is so powerful, man. That is so incredibly powerful. And
Yeah.
it really resonates with me with everything that I have been experiencing with my own visionary states. Because one of the things that's been happening to me is that when I fall asleep, and I actually might shed a couple tears on this
Yeah.
recording, everybody. It might happen. If it
That's
happens, it's
good,
gonna
man. You're
happen.
being genuine. Let it go, right?
I
Like, it's good to
appreciate
cry.
that.
It's good to
Fuck.
cry. I
But
cry.
yeah, so I see the faces of the sweet macaque monkeys, man,
Hmm.
when I'm falling asleep, and these beautiful animals, man, and they're being taken and they're being experimented on. And I tell my listeners that sometimes I watch videos so that you don't have to. Like I don't want people to have to like, it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
stuff. It's hard
Yeah.
stuff. And so when you look at these it's undercover videos of people that go into undercover
Hmm.
laboratories, and they record, and they're doing the Lord's work, and they're showing what's happening to these sweet animals. And it's just like, it is absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And these little animals are like asking for help like that. So that's what when I'm falling asleep, I'm seeing their faces, and they're asking
Yeah.
for help, like, because they're
Yeah.
more intelligent than us. That's what us humans need to realize. We have a certain type of intelligence, and it is impressive, and we can do things like drill for oil and gas, and that's pretty amazing. And we have
Yeah.
smartphones, ridiculous devices. This situation right now, there's no way I could have my podcast or do any of this amazing remote stuff. Technology is awesome, and it really helps, and I'm here for it. At the same time, the macaque monkeys are intelligent as fuck. They know what's going on. They're in tune with nature. They're just trying to vibe. And there's like islands. I think it's like Mauritius. If I'm wrong on the details, just cut me some slack. But
Yeah.
there's like an island where they let these little guys like reproduce and live, and then they like kidnap. It's trafficking. They
Yeah.
kidnap the animals, they traffic them to these labs, and then they experiment on them. So these animals, it is predatory. It is, in my humble opinion. I understand people are going to say like, well, you need science needs things to experience. In my humble opinion, it is predatory and it's not okay because these little animals are just trying to vibe in nature and be themselves
Yeah.
and be. I was about to say be humans because in a way, yes, they're trying to live just like we're trying to live. And they have
Yeah.
this beautiful island and they want to stay on the island and they want to be in their monkey communities and they want to do their monkey things.
Yeah.
It's very similar, man, to now like with humans. Like I feel like humans now we're at a point now in like the history, the arc of history or whatever. And I do believe in the from the bottom of my heart that the arc of the universe does bend towards justice and there is a
Yeah.
morality, there is an underlying morality to the universe.
Yeah.
That's something that Confucius, that the ancient sage Confucius was talking about, the underlying morality. And it just dawned on me at the gym the other day that I feel as though there was like a little psyop there with like the phonetics of Confucian and confusion. In English,
Oh, interesting.
confusion means like, oh, I don't know what's going on. In
Yeah.
the Asian cultures, Confucian is like this deep philosophical understanding. In a lot of ways, it's like about allowing, going back to the macaque monkeys, kind of
Yeah.
like allowing the macaque monkeys to be in nature, allowing us to be in nature. These are Confucian ideas. So it's interesting. It's like, man, how far back does this shit go? Like the West, whatever you want to say, has been threatened by Eastern philosophy because
Mhm.
Eastern philosophy has a lot of wisdom. Anyway, I'm just
No,
it's this interesting little point.
it is interesting, and there's a book Gary Zukov wrote years ago called The Dancing Wu-Li Masters, and he was a quantum physicist who started studying Eastern religion, and he's like, this is quantum physics, right? Like we have our scientific approach to it, but the Eastern traditions of the underlying consciousness in everything. If you watched What the Bleep Do We Know, they have that double slit experiment, and basically they fire these photons at a target, and they have one pattern on the target if the camera is turned off, but as soon as they turn a camera on and the photon knows somehow that it's being observed, they demonstrate a different pattern on the target. There's that underlying consciousness there, and that's what I think we're working with. And from a higher perspective, if everything is source, that's something that I've sat and contemplated for a long time. Like even what we would call the darkness is also source, right? So, but I do believe that everything bends back towards morality, and in time, everybody and everything will be absorbed back into source, which is love, bliss, happiness, joy, freedom. We happen to be in this dualistic world.
And would you say that we're also in like a very heightened period of time? So I've been realizing, and another character on the show that we're gonna have, I'm seeing it in the future. We're gonna have a
Yeah, yeah.
forum conversation. I call him Chris the Machinist. Chris the Machinist.
Love it.
He always gives me like really interesting documentaries and stuff like
Okay.
that to and I just lost my train of thought. Do you
We
remember what we were talking about?
episode, we were talking about everything bending back to source and everything being source.
Yes. I don't remember. It'll come back to me because
Yeah.
it all ties in together. But
Yeah.
it really,
Oh, you were talking about, do we go in cycles, right? And we're at a heightened stage of something right now,
yes, it
right?
feels like we're at a very heightened state of the cycle. Like people talk about
Mhm.
like the Kali Yuga, for example,
Yes.
that may be like the time of changes. I've read a lot of books written by indigenous people about the time of changes. There's been
Yeah.
prophecies by the Tibetans, by the Hopis, by many, many cultures. There's been prophecies that correlate
Yeah.
strikingly similarly to like this situation that we find ourselves in now. So
Yeah.
how
Well,
do you
and speaking of that, with the legend of the eagle and the condor, right? Like we were talking about feathers.
yes.
That's one of those legends that they say goes back as far as 2,000 years. The Hopi shared it as well as some tribes in South America. And I actually have feathers that I use as part of my healing practice. So I have two condor feathers that were a gift from South America. And the
Wow.
legend of the eagle and the condor says that there's these 500-year periods of time called Pachacutis, and we're entering into the sixth Pachacuti right now. Pachacuti in the South American way means to literally turn upside down, like you're turning an hourglass upside down. So reality gets turned upside down. There's a new way of being. The last Pachacuti started around 1490. So this Pachacuti started somewhere around 1990. But in the Legend of the Eagle and the Condor says that during the fifth Pachacuti, the one that just ended, the eagle in the north would bring the world to the brink of extinction. But just as the Pachacuti changed, the condor and the eagle would be reunited, and the condor would teach the world how to live in harmony. So in the Native American culture,
who would teach who? Who would teach
the condor would come? The condor and eagle would reunite and teach the world how to live in harmony with Pachamama.
Okay, got it.
So in northern Native American traditions, their most sacred bird is the eagle, and this happens to be a Hopi medicine man's eagle feather that was gifted to me. The eagle has a really big brain and a small heart. It's very intellectual. It's very far-sighted. It flies really high, and it's like a thinking bird. The condor has a really small brain, but a huge heart and a 14-foot wingspan. I mean, you can see how big these feathers are.
Yeah.
And when the condor and eagle reunite, the brain, the intellect, and the heart, the intuition, are reunited, and they live in balance. Like the balance point of the yin yang, right? It's keeping both sides in balance. So intellect and intuition come together in love, and we learn how to live in harmony.
Damn.
And that's I think what you're speaking of now, where we're at that heightened point as things are turning around, as the power systems that came up in the late 1400s, think conquistadors, think a lot of colonization, those kinds of things, that very patriarchal society. As we enter in this Pachacuti, that's starting to break down. That doesn't mean it's going to go easily, but they're starting to break down. And we're feeling that stretch because the way things used to be is changing. And inside us, we know there's like a divine spark inside of us. And there's things that resonate, and there's things that know. It's like, a foal can be born, and in an hour, that little horse is standing up on its own and walking, and no one had to teach it how to do that. It just knows. And I think we have spiritual things in us like that too, that know, and they're resonating. And the stress we feel is us realizing those things, but also feeling like, hey, it's not happening right now, or it's not where it fully could be. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of the stress we're feeling right now. It's like the awakening, birth pains of awakening. The contractions, are no fun. The birth process is no fun, but it's necessary for birth, for new life to come into the world.
Okay, this is a perfect segue then into the next thing I want to discuss with you, man. So you are a very gifted energy worker.
Thank you.
End of story.
Thank you.
I love energy work, and I feel as though I'm learning how to ride the wave of time, how to use energy. I had that drinking problem for a long time that kind of shook me off my course. I love the idea of how every river ends in the sea, and how sometimes rivers are real slow and windy.
They meander,
stuck in little, eddies. So I got stuck in the alcohol eddy. So anyway, I'm free of that now, and I'm learning how to manage the energy and everything like that. When we have this heightened time, what are some ideas, thoughts, guidance you have about being an energy worker in heightened times?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. There's a lot of ways we could go with that. I mean, I think the first thing is to realize you're going to feel it, right? We're sensitive to energy, we're going to feel it. So knowing that, okay, we can at least know we're okay. But then there's practices that we can do that I think help us to stay grounded. One of them is breath work. Pranayama means life force control, and there's certain breathing techniques you can do, like even count breathing, where you breathe in for a certain number of seconds, and then you hold it for the same number of seconds and breathe out for that same number of seconds. And if you do that for 10 minutes, your central nervous system will relax and you'll actually calm down. If I feel anxious or angry, my breathing's shallow, it's fast, and it's in that state. And if I'm calm and relaxed, I breathe slow and deep. So if we desire to change our state, we can breathe slow and deep to feel relaxed. We do it in reverse, right?
Okay.
That is a key. That's a key thing. Focusing on radiating. Like when I was first coming up in energy healing work, I heard a lot about shielding, right? Like putting up shields. And I used to do a lot of that. People would be like, hey, can you put a shield around me? Or I'd be like, hey, how can I shield myself? Which those work. But one, they're kind of masculine. They're intellect based because you say what you're shielding against. But if something else, not that comes in, it comes right through the shield. And it also reinforces the notion of separation, right? Because I'm shielding myself from you, which means we're separate. And I had some realizations doing healing work that rather than shield, if we focus on the light inside of us, we can change our perspective to where we're radiating that light out. We still get the same protection. Actually, we get even more protection because radiating love is very feminine based. And that's when we're tapping into that cosmic consciousness that already knows everything that could possibly happen. So we don't have to add something to our shield or be like, oh, I want to include this or I want to include that in my shield. Radiating love, we're automatically protected. Like if you launch a rocket towards the sun, that rocket's not making it to the sun. It's going to burn up at some point. And the sun's just doing its thing. It's just radiating. Anything you throw at the sun is going to burn up before it gets into the sun. But at the same point, we're warmed by the sun. So if we're radiating that love, we're protected, but we're also radiating love to everybody around us. And that's affecting the collective consciousness we were talking about. And it reinforces the notion of oneness instead of separation.
What about self-defense? What about self-defense? Like, what about if it's a situation like you physically need to defend yourself or just energetically, like you don't want, there's an energy in front of you that you're not interested in, you know, because I feel what you're saying for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely the radiating of the love. I think when people are asking about the shields and stuff, part of it is like a practical question of like how to like navigate that. That's a tough situation.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's part of our own personal journey and striving and attainment and experimenting, right? Like the great spiritual masters of the East give pointings, but they don't say, most of them don't say, do it like this. They say, try this and see if that works for you. And if it doesn't, discard it. And if it does, keep it. But I got to think like people like the Buddha didn't have to shield themselves, right? Not that we're all Buddha, but at some point, if we're radiating enough light, the situations where we have to shield ourselves maybe diminish. There may be, and I've had to realize this for myself. Sometimes somebody maybe comes up and you feel their energy and you're like, ooh, I want to get away. But sometimes that person's seeking our light, right? So just having a dialogue with that person and realizing that source is speaking to source, right? It's a two-way, we're all source. So it's source speaking to source. If I can hold space for them and have a conversation and treat their whatever it is they're talking about as like this is priority for them, it's important, then a lot of times in that moment healing happens and that charge dissipates between people. I mean, if it's physical violence, yeah, I'm gonna defend myself or try excuse myself from the situation if I can, like get away. But I also feel like the higher we radiate, the higher we vibe, the less likely it is we're going to be in that situation in the first place. So
there's there's ethical ways too. Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
No, go ahead.
There's ethical ways of if it does, like even with physical altercations, there's ethical ways where you can not to get too in the nitty gritty and stuff, but things like chokes and stuff like that, where you're not actually damaging the person, but you can extricate yourself. That's why I think like knowing a little bit of jujitsu, some martial arts stuff is helpful. Because you're right, man. Healing can actually happen, and maybe you don't have to like break someone's arm. Maybe you can just have them take a little nap for 20 seconds.
Right, like the minimum force to get yourself to safety, right?
Exactly.
You don't have to break out the 12 gauge and there may be times when that's required, but there's a philosophy in Buddhism called ahimsa, which means non-harm. And in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, he says, when you master non-harm, no harm can come to you. It's like kind of another saying would be like, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. well, what if we put the sword down? Right?
Mm.
And are we going to draw somebody else with a sword into our life? I'm not claiming to know the absolute answer to that, but I think that's a subject for contemplation too. And I've had people relate stories to me where they were in the middle of like riots and very violent situations, and they made a conscious decision, I'm not going to hurt anybody. And like, you know, they didn't get shot, they didn't get hit. The storm just kind of moved around them. Again, I don't know, but I've heard those kinds of stories, and it kind of dovetails into that mastery of non-harm. And when you master that, no harm will come to you.
Absolutely.
Kind of like law of attraction, right? Like, am I putting out thoughts of harm? No. Okay, I'm not likely to attract that to myself.
Right, right. Yeah, that is that's a fascinating. I need to meditate on that. Like that
Right.
that
And
is
it's coming from a
really
guy who's
really
a military,
interesting.
right? Like I know a lot of ways to do a lot of things to people. And I used to carry, right? And then at some point I'm like, I'm not gonna carry a gun.
Mm,
I'm just
okay.
not, right? For me, personal choice. I don't judge either way, but for me, I just chose to put that down.
Damn, that's really insightful, man. Because I run up against that sometimes with folks. I mean myself too.
Yeah,
I think a lot of us have trauma and stuff like that. But yeah, like some people they have trauma and they get scared in situations and they're
sure.
like, well, how am I supposed to radiate love if I'm like being intimidated or threatened?
Yeah.
And I think the points that you bring up are very deep and worth contemplating. Like when you okay, live by the sword, die by the sword. What happens when you put down the sword?
Right.
It's
And
a
what
good
happens
question.
if everybody did that, right? Would we have wars anymore? Because war hasn't worked, right? If the Pax Romana, that 200 years of peace that Rome had, was like the longest period of peace in the world, over how many tens of thousands of years? Like clearly, war hasn't ended war, and war hasn't really brought peace. It's just there's quiet and then there's more war, right? So like, you know, that's, again, I think this is that pivotal point we're at, and the stress we're feeling. I think a lot of us came here, we experienced trauma, we experienced different things that our parents and their generations before them experienced. And I think a lot of us who are here now are here to end generational patterns. So we say we're not
Mm,
going to do that, right? Maybe I was abused by my father, and I say I'm not going to do that to somebody else. And I hear that time and time again from people who have experienced trauma in their life, and they're not going to do it that way. And it requires a standing up. It is kind of stressful because you're moving into a new way of being that's different from your formula, you know, your formative years. But that's where the courage comes in. And I think too, like it's a process of iteration. So let's say you have an altercation and you don't feel safe, and maybe you're not as loving as you could be. If you realize that and you're like, hey, I'm going to do it differently next time. Every time we realize that, we've had a victory, right? And
mm,
we're bending that arc more and more back towards morality, ethics, the divine, all of that, right?
yeah.
Maybe we don't do it right the first time or the 20th time, but at some point we do better and better and better and better and better.
All right. So what are your thoughts on there's a topic, a concept that comes up over and over again for me, personally, meditation, life, podcast, everything. And I just call it the adversary. That's my term I use for it.
Yeah.
And so the Buddha said that life is suffering, and I come from a Finnish background, and the
Oh,
concept of
okay.
sisu is
Yeah.
like that, very similar. Life is suffering, but like be cheerful about it, because hey, there's gonna be problems, so just it's part of it. Let's enjoy it.
Yeah.
Try to enjoy it. Try to enjoy the
Yeah.
problems. Do the best you can. Sometimes you can't enjoy the problems. That's okay. Forgive yourself, and then try to enjoy the next problem or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when the adversary, so the adversary is, I'm studying the adversary. To be honest with you, I'm
Okay.
studying it because I want to understand strategic empathy, Sun Tzu. I want to know how the adversary operates so I can
Mhm.
negotiate the adversary. The adversary seems to be an invisible force. It seems to be a force that loves to work in secret, loves to be
Mhm.
in total blackness, does not like the light being shined on it. And that's a
Yeah.
massive weakness.
Yeah.
Massive weakness, by the way, I should say. Like, if you can't handle light being shined on you, dude, you're weak as fuck. That's like really, you know what I mean? If all you have
Yeah.
to do is shine a fucking light and the person disappears, like, you're
Yeah.
dealing with, that's weak, you know what I mean? But at the same time, you got to give the devil its due or whatever. The adversary
Right.
obviously, finds ways to like do devious shit. So you have an external, what I perceive that we are in some sort of spiritual, I don't like to use the word war, altercation, conflict,
Mhm.
issue. It's happening. The
Yeah.
things that are happening here down here in 3D plus time, I feel
Yeah.
as though it's also happening in the greater realms and stuff. And there's spiritual stuff going on. Like, so you
Hmm.
have an external force that wants to operate in secret and wants to destabilize, wants to cause suffering, actually wants to, because for some reason this adversary seems to get something out of it, seems to maybe feed on the suffering or something like that. Like it's maybe it's like slightly parasitical or something like that. So that is real tricky to deal with because the adversary is always running away from the light. It's always running away from. So you're out there, you're shining the light. The adversary is
Yeah.
finding little corners to hide and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That is what I feel when I have conversations with like mediums, psychics, people who are very like spiritually tuned in. That's the thing that I have not yet really like had someone really face head on. People love to say things like, "Oh, well, you need to have bad in order to have good," and it's all, and I'm like, I understand that. I understand that, but I also feel in my heart that there is some suffering that is actually not necessary. It's not nature's suffering. It is
Mhm.
suffering that's being like seeded by some sort of adversarial external force. Your
Yeah.
thoughts, sir?
Yeah. Yeah. So that is a deep question, right? I would say that I resonate with what you're feeling, which is, there's this 3D world, but then there's levels higher than that where there is what I would just call light and dark, just to give names to it. Light being sort of the path of service to others, and the realization that we're all one, and the dark being a service to self model, thinking that somehow it's going to move to enlightenment that way. And I love like sci-fi movies. Star Wars and Star Trek are some of my favorite shows. Well, Star Wars is like, to me, that's like a perfect analogy for what's going on right now.
Hmm.
You have the rebels who are the ones seeking light, the Jedi, and then you have the dark side. Now, like, why does the dark side hate the rebels? Why does the dark side want power? They never really explain that, other
Hmm.
than that it doesn't like the fact that the rebels are using the force and they stand for the light. But they're always talking about more power, power, more power, right? Until you become a Sith Lord, and the more power you get, the more physically deformed they become, and they're just seeking that. Um, why is that? I don't know. I've heard people say that like you need contrast. You need darkness for contrast. If you go to a diamond store and you want to look at a diamond, the first thing they do is hold up a black velvet background so you can see the light against the darkness. There's other concepts like, in the Hindu Upanishads, the creation stories, creator says to itself, we were one and we desired to become many. And so it came up with this power of Maya, which would allow Source to carve off part of itself and temporarily forget who it was to have the experience of finding itself again, almost like a divine movie. So like if you and I go watch a movie and Brad Pitt plays a bad guy and we watch that movie and he's like this, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right? He's an assassin or whatever. If I see Brad Pitt on the street, I don't think you're an asshole, you're a murderer, right? Because I realized he was playing a part in a movie. So if we move up from the 3D perspective up to like what Source's perspective might be,
Hmm.
if we can understand the divine, if ultimately everything is Source and ultimately everything's going to go back to Source, like Source maybe is just watching a movie. And the things that we call suffering, and this is hard to hear, but like really aren't in the end, like it almost, I hate to say doesn't matter, but it's like a movie that Source watched and it was entertaining for a time.
Man,
Uh,
that's like so I hear you, man, and I hear what you're saying. That's also like that can be kind of tough to deal with because like
yeah,
some of the suffering that's going on is so horrific
it's
that to
very
think
real.
that
Yeah.
you know, you don't, to think that it's just like some, and this is not what you're saying. You're not saying that it's like some sort of entertainment. Obviously not. You're talking about like you can see things from a different perspective when you're coming at it from like a greater dimension.
Yeah.
But it's like at the same time, it feels like I just, this voice inside me is always, and my whole life, the voice inside has been like, no, not okay. You know, like the really awful things, like, no, not okay, you know? And so I'm like, I want to, when I pass on into the next realm, I want to be able to hold my head held high and my spirit held high and know that I did everything I could to fight the good fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's okay. I got an idea for your question. Like,
Okay.
it almost resonates with like the oil and gas shamanism thing, because you need to have that contrast, like you said, but like, there's more ethical ways to do the contrast game. Like, you don't have to make it so horrific for actual real people and little kids and stuff like that. They don't have to go through this horrific suffering there's like a infinite variety of ways that you can have that contrast, but it's like there has to be like kind of like rules to the game, I feel.
Yeah, and I intuitively feel that way too. And to your point, like, I'm not saying that it makes suffering right or that we should allow it. I think we should, in every way possible, work to end that and spread the light. And I say that as somebody who was like beaten so badly that I've left my body multiple times because the pain was so intense. I could not, like, they're beating the piss out of somebody, like that actually happens. I've done that. I've had that happen to me. So I say that was very hard for me to even think about that concept for a very long time. Because I'm like, no, this can't be right. And maybe it's not. But I do think we have that divine essence in us. How it gets obscured in some people, I don't know. How they can like experiment on a monkey day after day after day, and that's their work. I'm sure they think they're doing good, but I don't know how. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
That I don't know how to resolve that question. What I do know how to do is what feels right for me, like spread as much light as possible. Like you mentioned, those dark corners that the dark seems to find. Yeah. Well, I think the more people that spread light, there's less and less and less and less of those corners to hide in.
There you go.
Until at some point because there's really in the material world, there's no such thing as darkness. There's just the absence of light. There's no such thing as cold. There's only the absence of heat, right? Like you can't make cold. You can just take the heat out of something. So there's a lower limit on cold, like absolute zero, 473 below 0 Fahrenheit. That's the coldest anything can go. But there's no upper limit on heat. Like the sun can be 10 million degrees, 20 million degrees, 30 million degrees, right? Because there is heat. So it's like we're bringing light into areas where the light is lacking.
Dude, I resonate with that. That gives me hope.
That's what we can do, right?
Yeah, that gives me some hope, man, because I do feel like the light is shining. Sometimes I feel like the sun is brighter than it used to be. I live in Phoenix, so, you know, maybe that's subjective, but I feel like
feels like that, right?
The light is friggin' pouring down, and many, many millions of souls are waking up and shining lights. People are shining lights every which way. And it's getting harder and harder to find corners to hide. So that is something that is very hopeful. That's almost like if we can get to that, and I believe we can. I honestly believe, first off, I believe anything is possible. I believe in the magic of the universe. I think we can achieve a state in which it's all light, baby. There's no more corners.
Yes. Yes.
You know?
Yeah, and take away that suffering and the
and then we can work on the forgiveness. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing is the horror is so horrific that then you need restorative justice. People need to feel some kind of way. People who have been done wrong, you know. you know the thing. Like, I
Yes.
can't even imagine. I'm not even a parent. I don't even know what it's like to be a parent. So
Yeah.
I can only imagine the love that you must feel for like your little baby. And when something happens to your little baby, for example,
Yeah.
you're gonna need restorative justice. You're gonna need,
Yeah.
and so then when the light is shining so bright that there's no more dark corners to hide, then it's almost like then the real work begins.
Yeah. Well, and I had a realization sitting in a Buddhist temple in Vietnam. I had a lot of abuse from my dad growing up. And like I said, he and I have talked about it, reconciled it. It's out in the light. But there was a period of time where I wanted vengeance. Like that
Mm,
part of me desired that restorative justice.
mm,
But as we went through our journey and my dad actually authentically asked for my forgiveness, I was sitting in a Buddhist temple in Vietnam, meditating in front of this big image of Buddha. And the thought crossed my mind, if I ever desired forgiveness for something I've done or said, and I've said cruel things in the past, if I desired forgiveness for me, why am I special?
mm.
And if I would more than anything desire forgiveness from somebody I loved who I might have hurt, then that has to apply to everybody, including for me, like my dad, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I sat up and I was just like, I got to forgive my dad. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And something inside of me shifted. Like, I can't explain that. Like that, it opens up a whole nother topic of like divine intervention or grace or something from higher up from source that helps us cross a bridge, right? How are we going to get across the infinite ocean of Maya or illusion? The Gitas all say through grace, right? Like there's our part, which is devotion and dedication to the light. And then at some point, source comes back in and helps and quantum leaps us to another state, like what you're talking about, past the veil of illusion where we think we have to hurt people to the, oh, joy, bliss, love, freedom, source. I'm you, you are me.
Yeah.
And that realization, way beyond intellectual realization, like the knowingness inside of our being that you and I are one.
Yeah. It We were also talking off mic about the anxiety that many people feel and how it does, it feels like sometimes it feels like there's electromagnetic chicanery happening and like stuff like that. There's the Starlink satellites. They just
Yes.
keep shooting these stupid ass Starlink satellites. I don't know if you know Dusty Don, but Little Raven's running for president in 2024.
All
And
right.
my first day in office, deactivate the Starlink satellites,
Nice.
deorbitize them, crash them safely, take the tech, build entertainment systems and homeless encampments. That's first
Yeah.
day in office.
Yeah.
But
Nice.
yeah,
I
so
like that platform.
thank you. I appreciate it. But yeah, so the Starlink, there's this effort, I think, being made by people who have way too much hubris and really don't know what's going on. They think that they can somehow like control the electromagnetic situation.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that's just ridiculous. I feel as though there's so many avenues to like shoot that divine intervention you speak of, the angelic assistance. There's
Yeah.
so many avenues to reach the angelic assistance that I feel as though, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Like,
Yeah.
you can put however many Starlink satellites in the sky and do whatever crazy shit you want to do. I feel as though we can always blow right past that.
I love that thought. And let's see if this, what I'm about to say is my, like, I think I'm interpreting what you're saying. So take, 5G, for instance. And, as an aside, I do feel like there are technologies that can broadcast thought forms. Case in point, I was never for masks. You look at the science, viruses go right through them. I worked at a place where I had to wear them, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
day I didn't have to do that, I took that sucker off. But as anti-mask, or as I should say, as pro-free breathing as I
Yeah.
was,
Pro smiles.
yeah, there were times when I'd be walking along and all of a sudden I would feel like I felt naked, like I needed to put something on my face.
Mm,
A feeling right out of nowhere. And I'm like, I know that's not me. Where is
mm,
that coming from? And I've talked to or heard other people talk about like how they were against, getting certain things. And then all of a sudden they felt this overwhelming compulsion to go get certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, they're like, oh my God, what have I done? I'm a podcaster and I've railed against this and I just did this. But they felt this compulsion, right? So maybe some of that is going on. I think the technology is there for it. And there's a lot of studies and papers, even, in Russia, they were doing this in the 70s, where there were some workers that were rioting at a hospital, and the Spetsnaz, which is their special forces, came out and they directed this thing towards them, and they read into it, in 5 minutes, you're going to put down your weapons and come up and knock on the door and ask for your jobs back. And then they turned the thing on, and in 5 minutes, everybody stopped rioting, and they came back and said, hey, can we go back to work?
Wow.
So I think we got to have awareness that that kind of stuff could be out there. And then another thing that you're talking about, blowing right past it, there's a lot of talk about 5G and what it's possibly doing to us and all those sorts of things, right? And you can feel like a victim, or I can feel like a victim because of that, because like I'm not going to stop 5G towers going up, absent some miracle, right? Like they're going up. Mm-hmm. So if they're going up and they're broadcasting 5G, and whatever's happening with 5G is happening with 5G. And this is where we were talking about masculine and feminine. Masculine is if-then statements, right? Like computer programs written in the masculine format, if this, then that, or else do this, right? That's how this stuff works. Virus software defines these certain characteristics and it protects your computer against that, but it doesn't automatically update against the newest thing. Somebody has to go in and add to that. In the feminine, if there was a divine feminine virus protection program, you would say, I desire my computer to be virus-free, and then conscious intelligence would always keep it that way without us necessarily knowing how. Mm-hmm. So in healing, with the work that I do, and in life, there's in different scriptures it says you got to be like a child to reach the next stage of enlightenment or to get into the kingdom of heaven. So if I think like a child and I think here's this 5G radiation, and I can't get rid of the towers, what can I do? Well, I can talk to my body, I can talk to source, I can call in energy that I am literally transparent to that. So when those waves hit me, they don't hit me. It's like I'm not there, right? And my body's not affected by it.
Not receptive to it?
Yeah, like it doesn't even hit me. It's almost like I'm glass and it goes right through and doesn't touch anything.
And you do how do you do that? You kind of call on spirit, you call on angelic assistance?
Yeah, I do. So I call in like all of my guides, angels, and ascended masters when I open sacred space. And then I literally open my heart. Like it's like opening it to feel love for a baby or a puppy, or, that kind of love, that feeling of radiating. Mm-hmm. And then I, like a child, use my imagination to imagine waves and imagine them passing right through me without touching me. And then there's things we work with like DNA activation. So for a while I've known about 12 strands of DNA. I got shown that in several journeys. And then on a really particularly powerful medicine journey, I saw two things. One, I saw, Source took me back to the moment of creation, and it said the saddest moment in the universe was when Source agreed to temporarily forget a part of itself and create separation in this creation. But the other piece was they showed me a 13th strand of DNA that's in the center of the helix. And that 13th strand is that resonance and remembrance and breadcrumbs to go back to where we came from, which is to raise our consciousness and go back to source consciousness. So we have that code in us.
Wow.
So using our imagination like a child, that intuitive, working in concert with source, guardian angels, your guides, angels, ascended masters, your highest self, if we declare ourselves to be invisible to those things, then personally I believe we are. And our DNA, being so intelligent, already can adapt to and know that. And a case study would be Roundup resistant weeds. I am no fan of glyphosate, but Roundup's been sprayed on crops to get rid of weeds for a long time. But now weeds have come up that Roundup doesn't hurt. Same strain of weed, but Roundup doesn't kill it anymore. That divine intelligence, that feminine intelligence, the intuitive intelligence that just knows how to fix things without us knowing how it fixes things.
Yeah.
Took care of the weeds. Then they had to come out with like stronger Roundup, and then they started resisting that. They adapted, right? And then they had to do this, add something else to it. And in time, the weeds will probably get used to that.
Oh yeah.
And I believe energetically, I can't prove it to you scientifically, but I believe energetically we can do that. We can declare that. Yet we live in a free will universe, so we can declare certain things against our free will. So we can say, I declared a violation of my free will for 5G radiation to negatively affect me.
Fuck yeah. I love that.
And even the dark side has to live by free will. Like,
yeah, they do.
Entities can attack us. Entities can do stuff that, and I used to get, as you get brighter in light, I used to get these things stuck all over me, and my teacher would clear me until I learned the concept of free will universe. But you can do a free will declaration. It's a violation of your free will for these negative entities to attack you, attach to you, influence you. There's a whole litany of things that when I do healing, I go through, and it sounds like a legal contract, but we're declaring that to the universe for myself or for the benefit of the person who we're doing the session with, who's agreed to that. Like, they're like, yeah, I desire that. We go through this free will declaration, and the other side has to abide by that too.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe maybe after the interview concludes, I'd be interested in seeing some of that free will declaration, and I would be interested in putting it out in the description for the episode,
that would be awesome.
for folks. Yeah, because it ties in with another concept that we wanted to talk about, which is sovereignty, the idea of sovereignty. And this is just becoming so key and foundational. What does that mean? How do we claim it for ourselves and maintain it for ourselves, despite these adversarial forces that are very interested in trying to sever us from our sovereignty? Let's move into that topic real quick, because when we were texting before, you introduced a very interesting idea about the jab, what I call the jab.
Yeah.
That one of the more subtle purposes of the jab was to try to sever people from their sovereignty, I believe was your words for it.
Yeah, let me tell you about that, because that actually came through. I had no idea that a lot of times in sessions, I don't know what's going to happen ahead of time. Like, we start with some intents, and then we go where we're guided to go. We may end up over here in a past life, or over here working on this or whatever. So I was working with a client who had not gotten jabbed, but we were talking about that and what was going on. And at a point in the session where we were both really quiet and I was tuned in and seeing what was happening, all of a sudden I had this realization that the jab was intended to sever a connection between the third and fourth lumbar of our spine and our navel. And when I saw that and realized that, inside I heard a scream of anger from something pretty dark that was filled with rage, that now that concept and that energy was in the collective consciousness. It was, again, this thing trying to operate in darkness. And when the light saw it, it felt rage. Now, interestingly, when I was talking to my client right after the session, she heard the same thing at the same time that I heard, like absolute rage that this had been discovered, because this was one of the key things they were going for. So I was like, it's awesome that we know that. It's awesome that now that's in the collective, that should be disrupted, right? But it wasn't until 2 years later, I was actually on a medicine journey, and I was talking to a guy who was a Chinese medicine practitioner. And I described what I saw to him, and he said, oh, that's interesting, because in Chinese medicine, the line between the third and fourth lumbar and your navel is called the Ming Men line. And the Ming Men line is your personal will and personal sovereignty. And this jab was trying to break that.
And also with our chakral system, right? That corresponds similar to one of our chakras, that point in the body?
Navel-ish would be, third chakra, which would be personal power.
Personal power.
Yeah, that's our abdominal chakra, which is personal power.
Oh, hell yeah. Now we're cooking with gas.
Right. So this was one of the purposes of this thing, was to cut that line. So people were just like telling me what to do, So the personal sovereignty thing, man, I stopped watching the news years ago because I used to be addicted to it, and I would get so mad watching it, right? But you don't even know what to think, because there you could find a study to support any position out there you want to support. right?
Yep.
Whether you're for it, against it, or in the middle, there's a study for that.
Oh yeah.
As this information, air quotes, information is amplified and amplified and amplified. Like at some point, you got to hold your hands up and be like, I don't know what to believe. This guy's saying this, they're saying this, that guy's saying that, this says this, right? Our apple's good for you, bad for you, right? That's when we got to come back to personal sovereignty, because the only way we'll know is when we know. Like, no. So, meditation, becoming still, becoming quiet, learning to trust the quiet voice of intuition that says, hey, you should stop here and walk into this shop, or hey, you should do this. That's our sovereignty talking to us, right? If we all have a higher self that's on the other side of the veil and we're connected to it, and I believe our DNA is conscious and it's listening to us and it's tuned into our higher wisdom, we have a source of truth, and that source of truth is us through our higher self. And that, to me, is how we know. Like the way we know something feels really wrong, we know it's wrong because it feels wrong.
Yep.
Right? We know this because it feels that way, or we know this because it feels that way. That's our guidance. Abraham Hicks talks about that, like your internal guidance system, your emotions. But learning how to hear that, or if you're presented with a dilemma, instead of trying to think through it all the time, maybe sit with it and contemplate it. And I'm not advocating the use of tobacco or other plant medicines, but I've sat with a Native American pipe, and the spirit of tobacco, again, when you're honoring the spirit, you're talking to the spirit, you're asking for wisdom, things like that from the plant kingdom, from nature, sitting by a stream, whatever can help you just get a flash of insight. And then it's like, thank you for the answer to that question. And I've had that happen to me personally with the pipe, the Native American pipe, and just, American spirit tobacco, more times than I can count. Again, I'm not advocating that, but that is one way. Meditation's another way, where you get that guidance and wisdom, and you get a knowingness, and like you just know. People are like, how do you know? We're like, I don't know, because I know. I know because I know.
Yeah, it's about keeping that integrity of that machinery within ourselves that is able to know. That's that's the key.
And not to get like too much scripture in here, and I don't have a religion. I'm spiritual. I love one of my greatest joys in life is finding the common threads that are woven throughout all of our world traditions. But you had the lily of the valley on here, right? So there's another verse where Yeshua says, "Is it not written, I said, ye are gods?" And that part gets glossed over in a lot of the fundamentalist teachings, like that doesn't fit into the you're a bad person and you're going to burn narrative. But it literally says that in there. And also says the kingdom of heaven is inside you.
Yes.
So if we realize that we are spiritual beings having a human experience and not the other way around, if we realize our soul is eternal, if we realize that in time we're all going to fold back into source when this day of Brahma is over, as the Upanishads call it, then we don't have to give our power away to people who've put themselves in positions of authority. What we would call a patriarchal society. Well, that guy's the expert, so whatever he says, he must be better than me. He must know more than me. He must, maybe not. Now, okay, maybe he went to school. Maybe he read a lot of books. Maybe he knows a certain set of facts. That's very masculine. That feminine intuition, there's another scripture that says, don't worry about what you're going to say to the judge when you're going before the judge tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll know the words to say. That's alluding to what I call cosmic cloud consciousness, which is our connection to source. In the old days, when I was a kid, we had computers, or we were starting to have computers, and you had to type everything in that you wanted it to know. Then they had these little disk drives, and it held a little bit of information. Then they had hard drives, which would hold some information. But if it wasn't on your computer didn't know it. Then comes the internet. Now we have Netflix, we have Spotify, Apple Music. Anything we desire, we can stream on demand. So what if our consciousness could do that? Right? That's, I think, what they're talking about when we attain this higher consciousness, the Kutastha Chaitanya, or the Christ consciousness, or Samadhi, or Satori in the Buddhist tradition, or a medicine journey, vision quest in the Native American tradition. That's our tapping into cosmic intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have access to that, then we are sovereign. We know what we need to know when we need to know it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that I always operate in that space, but like that's an art and that's a practice of how do I tune into that more and more and more and more.
Yes. And
you ever had that moment of like when you're like, oh, I knew that.
Yes.
Like maybe we heard something and we didn't follow it, but we kind of knew already what was going to happen. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And synchronicities have a way of stacking upon themselves. When you open yourself up to synchronicities, it creates more synchronicities.
Dude, so yes, thank you. I have kind of noticed that and I've wondered about that myself. I'm like, well, when I did this and this thing happened, and then I also followed this, then it's like they start popping up all over the place. And you're like, whoa. Yeah. And I guess that would be like another way of saying, like, are you in flow or am I in flow?
Yep.
Right. That is a very good point you brought up there. It's like the importance of following our personal sovereignty and the results if we don't, right? Where we feel like we're fighting life and swimming upstream and all this other stuff.
Right. And like with, so even when you find yourself, because sometimes we do, so the salmon, they have to swim upstream as part of their life cycle. They have to swim upstream. But what they've discovered is that the water, like in a flowing river, the way that nature is just so beautiful, the way that nature just organizes itself without trying, it just does.
Yeah.
The flowing river has these little vortices and energetic little like situations that the fish, they intuitively understand how to ride those.
Like a slingshot kind of.
Exactly. So they're not actually swimming frantically upstream. They're finding these little eddies and vortices, and they're actually riding them to stay in place. And then they know when it's the right time. Yeah. They know when it's the right time to continue on their journey. So it's like, that's just that concept, man. It just, we could talk about that all day. Like just be knowing in your heart that you are activated and claiming that with the universe, that you are sovereign, you are activated, and like there's gonna be disruptions of there's gonna be that's just how it goes. There's gonna be disruptions. These are like, you can think of them as like fun obstacles. Like how can you like stay balanced on your board while you like navigate this little obstacle? Maybe there's a really crazy disruption and you get thrown off your board. It's all right, you just hold your breath. You know, you got your board attached still, you pop back up and you ride the next wave type thing. Like there's no, the idea that there's like absolute anything, I think is like a red herring. Like everything is part of the whole, like how everything is possible thing. And like, I've been saying over and over again that isms make schisms. Cause like I used to really like, thank you. I used to be like attached to certain isms. Like I'm this ism and I'm that ism. But like, I don't feel like that anymore, man. I just don't. Like I respect when people feel attached to isms. I respect it. And I'm not trying to tell anyone how to live or whatever. Like, because genuinely some people have their own relationships with things. But yeah, for me, it's like to stay balanced on my board. I'm just kind of like, I want to meet each person where they are in the moment. I want to meet each situation where it is in the moment. And I also want to honor my own ebbs and flows. My own sovereignty is going to be like moving and shaking and diving and juking.
So, like maybe we don't get it perfect in the beginning or for a while, right? Like if you fall off the board in the ocean, you don't stop surfing. You get back on your board and you try it again, right? And I think that's one of the gross misinterpretations of the word sin in certain scriptures is people take sin as you're inherently evil until you make yourself good. And the Greek word for sin is hamartia, which means to miss the target, like falling off your board. You didn't make it all the way to shore. Well, then just get back on your board and try again. It doesn't mean you're done forever or that you're a bad person. You literally missed the mark.
Right.
So then you try again, you practice, right? If we realize after the fact, man, I wish I would have done X, Y, and Z different, then the realization in that moment, one of my early meditation teachers, I would be like, oh, my mind wandered. And he's like, well, did you realize that and go back to center? And I was like, well, yeah, but it wandered. And he's like, well, every time you realize that and go back to center is a victory. And you just do another victory and another victory. And then, in time, becomes more natural. It becomes a little bit easier to stay there. Yeah.
Yeah, it also correlates with this idea of like the whole idea of like permanence and like absolute predictability and stuff, and how that's like also an illusion. Because yeah, I
Mhm.
really like that the etymology, I think is the right word, of sin is that it just means like missing the mark. Because in
Yeah.
like certain fundamentalist traditions, they're trying to say that like you sin and then that's like that's it, you fucked up and now you got to
Right.
burn forever type thing. And it's
Right.
like, wait a minute, that's it doesn't make any sense. Like it makes way more sense that when a river is meandering, you don't like scold the river. Even when like there's a little eddy that like gets, sometimes eddies get like totally off track and they have to sit stagnant for a while, and then like some
Yeah.
floods come and then they go. You're not like scolding the stagnant pond. It's just that's what it is right
Yeah.
now, and you do the best you can with it. But also when we are attached, like you said, with our own personal power and sovereignty, if you find yourself in a stagnant pond, you can declare like, we about to flood right now. Like
Yeah.
this is happening. I'm moving, you know, and it is like it's very powerful and trippy how the universe responds to that stuff too.
Yeah.
When you do start like discussing manifestation and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, it
Well,
blows
and
my
back to
mind.
your point earlier too about like what can we do in these stressful situations, and to honor what you're doing, another thing we can do is build community of a
Yeah.
high vibe tribe, right? Because
Yes.
if we desire to shift our vibration to get out of the lower vibration stagnant place into a higher vibration, sometimes being around high vibration people is a good way to do that, right? So
Yes.
you build that tribe, and then you have people you can talk to, and they can lift you up when maybe you're feeling down, or if they're feeling down, you can lift them up and remind them of the truth of who they are. And that's another way to shift our vibration. When that shifts, then we shift what we're experiencing too, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're not like alone on our journey. Like you say, when
Right.
you build that community, the thing about like with psychologically that we have like blind spots that,
Yes.
quote, neurotic behavior or whatever. A lot of times it's like unconscious stuff that's popping up into, and so it's
Yeah.
our blind spots. We don't see it, but our people we love and trust, they might see it. And
Yeah.
like that's
I
being a
love that.
true friend. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my wife, Lori, does that for me. And one time she bought me a little sticker that said, "Excuse me while I overthink this." Right. Like, I know that's one of my blind spots. Right. So I had to, getting back out of the masculine strategy. Here's 27 possibilities that could happen, and here's a strategy to address each one of them. And just getting
Right.
back to like living in life and being in the moment, and when something comes up, addressing it then, instead of
Hmm.
trying to like negotiate all possible outcomes. Right.
Right, which is just completely patently absurd on its face anyway. Like there's no way that, and it's very interesting to me, like the whole predatory capitalism thing, speaking of isms, the predatory capitalism thing. What the predatory capitalism wants is it wants absolute predictability. It wants like absolute assurance and permanent states of flow and stuff like that, so that then like the profits can be maximized. And that's what the predatory capitalism wants.
Yeah.
That's like an actual swimming upstream like that you're not working with the Tao. The Tao is going to find all kinds of creative ways to curl around that and disrupt that, because
Yeah.
it's not going to happen. And I think a lot of like some of the suffering that we were speaking of at the beginning, like the unnecessary suffering, is a result of trying to impose this like permanence and trying to impose this
Yeah.
predictability, and that can actually like cause some suffering. So it's like
Yeah.
important in our own lives as well. Like when we're too rigid in our thought process and stuff, we can inadvertently cause suffering in others. Like
Yeah.
that's just something to be like hyper aware of, and just always keeping that like flexibility of mind. And we do have so many allies, not just angelic allies, but plant allies and fungal allies.
Mhm.
Like that's one of the
Yeah.
strengths of the fungal medicine is
Yeah.
that, and I mean, even I'm not even just talking psilocybin. I love psilocybin, but also all of the other medicinal
Yeah.
mushrooms and supplemental mushrooms. These are, there's a term, adaptogenic, I believe. They kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like, yeah, they roll and flow like with the needs of the body and with the
Mhm.
needs of the mind, and they help you to attain that neuroplasticity. So like we're not alone on like so many levels. And like
Right.
one thing, and then I'll stop talking for a second. Like
No, no,
I
you're
used to,
good.
when I first was recovering from my divorce, which was like 5 years ago now, I was experiencing a lot of loneliness, and like
Mhm.
it's hard to be lonely. It's hard to feel alone, and that's something that I've always dealt with, and something that drove the drinking a lot of times was I would be in a crowd of people, and I'd always be like the life of the party, but inside
Yeah.
I would be like feeling so alone and stuff. And so
Mhm.
what I realized, and I had to go through some difficult, hard times to realize it, but that's like the really good stuff. Sometimes it comes from struggle, it comes from difficulty. That like I realized that the true way to address the loneliness is through connection with the source and connection with the
Yeah.
divine. That is like the real
Yes.
root of it.
Yeah. No, beautiful, beautifully said. And that reminded me, like, I do feel like sometimes on the journey there is a sense of aloneness as you realize that everything is source. Maybe at certain points in life, the things that I might have been excited about pursuing, whether it's material things or whatever, I don't have that excitement anymore. You
Yeah.
start to feel a little bit lonely, and I think as humans we're taught to always be moving, and when we get into those moments of silence, it feels really all alone. But if you can do what you did and have that connection to source, then we sort of transform aloneness, like we stick another L in there and make it all oneness.
Oh, nice. I like that.
That's what I'm playing with right now, right? Like that concept. Um,
Yeah, and like you could say like that 13th strand of DNA that you speak of,
yeah,
that's like that's inserting that L in and transforming
yeah. Oh,
alone to
nice.
all one. You know, it's
Yeah,
like it's this
yeah.
literal strand. You put it in there, and there's there's so many little like beautiful hints and stuff like that with the universe also, and with
Hmm.
phonetics when you study language and all that kind of stuff. And aprendiendo español, pero mi cabeza es demasiado slow sometimes.
Nice.
But like as you learn new languages, like that neuroplasticity, like there's just
Hmm.
so many ways that you can really like dig into this and play with it. And that's I love what you say about the importance of being like a child and using your imagination like a child and honoring your imagination like a
Hmm.
child, you know, like because
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be like so serious all the time too. You can like laugh and have fun and play with these things.
that's another one of my blind spots too. Is getting a little serious sometimes. Like like, oh, we got to do this, and uh, but yeah, that idea of puke in the Peruvian tradition, are like sacred play. Like it's
Ah,
sacred, but it's play. And in some of the Krishna stories too, like a lot of the plays that Krishna did were him playing with other people. Like it's very childlike. And I
mhm.
think that honoring the child in us, honors the innocence in us, and we're all kids in our heart somewhere, right? Like we still have
Yeah,
that wonder, that innocence, that imagination, the belief in magic. Uh,
yeah.
and when we can interact with other people like that, man, really cool things happen. And it feels good. It's just like that kind of innocence feels great.
One last question,
Yeah.
and then I'm gonna ask like the last question.
Okay.
What's some guidance for because like I feel that the innocence aspect is so critical and important, like as we are as like we are like children ourselves, and we keep that open, flexible mind. It's something to be honored and also protected.
Yeah.
How are some ways that we can protect our innocence? Because like that's the thing about innocence is like it also is vulnerable and tender. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do you navigate that? I know I'm asking you real easy questions today, Dusty.
Dude, yeah, no, you brought out the big guns, man. I mean, yeah, that's a balance, right? I mean, I think for one thing, maybe you got to know like the people where it's like safe to be that childlike innocence. Like you and I just easily open up to each other. Sometimes maybe it's not as easy to be that way. Like maybe it's sometime at work where it wouldn't be as well received.
Yeah.
Maybe we have to guard ourselves a little bit that way. Again, sometimes if you let that out, it lets it out in other people. So
Mm-hmm.
that is tough.
It's almost like by honoring the innocence, you do protect it in a way. By
Yeah.
realizing its significance and not downplaying it internally, it has the innocence itself is very powerful too. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of power there. It's not, when I say vulnerable, I don't mean in any way, shape, or form weak. There's a lot of power. And
Yeah.
like you say, like, yeah, you can be in like a really uptight, stuffy work situation, and sometimes graceful interjection of some lightness and some play can shake up the whole thing, and it makes other people happy too. So it's like, yeah, that's another one of just like really staying in that flow and being very
Yeah.
sensitive. Like, okay,
Yeah, and people respond well to authenticity, which I think is what comes through when we're innocent and childlike. I mean, and of course we desire to protect that, but at the same time, like as I feel into that, anytime we talk about putting on armor or taking up a shield or anything like that, we're hiding that light for one thing because we're covering it up with armor, and we're reinforcing that notion of separation. So, I mean, maybe not that we desire to get hurt, but maybe some of it is, being willing to be hurt or risk being hurt.
yeah,
There's times when I have done that and I've been rewarded, like, oh wow, I didn't see that coming, but that's really
mm.
cool. And there's times when it's hurt too, and I just realize, okay, well, I guess they're not ready to hear that or whatever. But the challenge for me is not to beat myself up for choosing to be vulnerable, like, oh, I should have known better, I should have been more shrewd or whatever. I think we just got to keep bringing the innocence and love, um, and then building that tribe with other people like that and let that grow. And the entanglement thing, when we're like that with other people, it's orders of magnitude more powerful, and it multiplies itself, and then that goes into the collective consciousness too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough one, but I think we got to keep bringing it if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the innocence will have a way, I feel this in my heart as I'm talking about it now. It has a way of protecting itself too. It has its own intuition. It knows what's up.
Yeah.
Especially when you are tuned into that intuitive aspect too. You'll know like when there's a little, maybe there's a window to interject some innocence here or there.
Yeah.
And yeah, with like psychedelic experiences, this is so foundational, 101, psychedelics 101, but I
Yeah.
talk about it all the time because for the youngsters coming up and stuff, set and setting, like you got to make sure that when you're entering into these psychedelic states, that's
Yeah.
sacred play. That is sacred play. You are engaging with the divine. This is medicine now. So you
Mhm.
got to make sure that you're surrounded by people you trust. It's just very important. You got to make sure that you're surrounded by people you trust. Very
Yeah.
important. Proceed at your own peril if you
You
start
can't
playing
go
around
into
with
that with
psychedelic.
your guard up because it's going to amplify that, right? And
I mean, you're gonna have a journey and you're gonna learn some stuff, but yeah,
yeah,
just
yeah,
like have some living things around you. Like you don't necessarily like I live in the industrial district of South Phoenix, but my
yeah,
apartment is my sanctuary and I got about
yeah,
25 house plants and I love all of them. And like, they communicate with me. Like plants communicate. And even like my mushroom supplements, like I'm engaging. This is
yeah.
activated engagement. So
Well, and I think you're hitting on another key point too, which is, I believe, I don't want to say have to, but it's really beneficial to acknowledge the fact that every thing has a consciousness, from a rock to an animal to a plant to whatever. Like when I talked about the spirit of tobacco, and when I say the spirit of tobacco, I'm talking about honoring the plant itself, worldwide, universal, like it has an energy. And I believe there's a divine order to everything, from geometry to music to mathematics. Like it's all so precise,
hmm.
and things are placed here to help us. That if there's a mushroom journey, if you enter into that, not like drilling for oil, but like the same thing with like this intent, right? Pure intent, and honoring of the mycelium, and a thankfulness for, like, thank you for helping me. I believe it hears that, right? And it feeds
Oh yeah.
back that to you, versus I'm out somewhere, let's just try this to see some colors.
Right.
That's not honoring the plant. And I think the plant will actually partially withdraw its spirit from that experience because you're not honoring it, right? It's not a
For
two-way
sure.
communication.
For
And I think
sure.
that's huge, right? Like that's respect for all life. But in that setting, like a part of it is, what's my internal setting? What's my internal, you know,
Yeah.
view towards the journey I'm about to undertake?
I wanna schedule another interview with you, man, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we can like I want to dedicate a whole interview to like getting into more nitty gritty about psychedelics and psychedelic journeying, if
yeah,
you'd be interested in that,
yeah,
because
yeah. I'd love to talk about
I'm
that.
like I'm that's a lifelong learning process for me, and I am engaged with some very sacred medicines, and
Hmm.
I want to be utilizing best practices to like respectfully engage with these medicines, and I would love to like dig into that, and I think it would be helpful for listeners as well.
I think they are helpful allies, and especially in these challenging times, if
Yeah.
you go back to nature, we have plant allies. I've
Hmm.
Creator foresaw this time coming, and we have, when used respectfully, we have lots of different allies that can help us make a quantum leap past something where emotionally we might be stuck, but you do this, and all of a sudden you're in the place of witness, and you can see this without judgment. That's a game shifter.
Yeah. All right. So we're almost at the 90-minute mark, where I think we're gonna
I feel like I
probably
could
wrap
talk
things.
all day, man, with you.
I know I could too, man. That's what I'm saying. As soon as I hit end recording, I'm gonna schedule the next one because
All
this
right.
is so much fun, so much fun. Like talk
Oh,
about like
totally.
a childlike state of play. It's rare too. This is rare. Like no, a lot of times when I'm like,
Yeah,
especially interviewing and stuff, it's a little bit more like all business or this is different. I'm just
yeah.
really genuinely enjoying myself, and that's amazing.
And that's hope
So
too, right? Like there's some spark in people that's there. Like
yes,
you didn't put that there. I didn't put that there, but somehow it's there. The
yes,
willingness for two people who didn't know each other to show up and say, let's have a conversation. I'm not patting myself on the back because it happens to lots of people or you, but like we have that within us. And the spontaneous arising of that was no other than me saying yes to an experience. Like I didn't make that. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like it's there.
Yeah, and we were
That's that
brought
magic.
together by like a really dear soul sister
Yeah.
of mine and
Yeah.
mutual friend
Yeah.
also. So that's really beautiful too. And another thing I will say, just as like a little bit of like a lesson in all of this too, is the way in which like Dusty Don operated like with me when we were preparing for the interview too, like just showed a lot of like presence and like centeredness and just like checking in and confirming and like all that kind of stuff. It shows like this respect and willingness, and so that helped me then to come with like a calm heart and like good
Yeah.
faith. And so that's important too. I took a professional mediation course way back in
Oh, sweet.
2009. Yeah, it was really interesting course. And one of the things that's has really stuck with me is that when two parties are coming to the mediation table,
Hmm.
there's certain things that have to be present or else you're wasting your time. And
Yeah.
one of the things that must be present is good faith willingness. There has to be mutual good faith willingness to engage. Otherwise, the mediation is just not going to be possible. You're going to have to come back at a later time when there is that good faith. That is foundational. So
Because you
like,
can feel that, right? Like you're radiating good faith. The other party feels that, they radiate it back.
yeah. And people who are interested in making the world a better place and stuff, like, well, you got to bring good faith in all your
Yeah.
engagements. Like even
Yeah.
people that you might be totally repelled by their ideology, if you're interested in making the world a better place, you still have to bring good faith if you want to engage with that. Like it's
And it's
just,
source talking to source, man. I mean,
yeah.
that's not always, if I try to keep that in the back of my mind, not always easy, but it helps with that, hearing something you don't necessarily agree with, but whether I agree or not, like your point is valid, right? Your viewpoint is
Yeah.
valid
Yeah.
for you, right? Like it's valid.
So before you let folks know like how to find you on the interwebs and all that stuff, my
Yeah.
last question is some practical guidance for listeners. And this can just be off the cuff. You don't whatever
Yeah.
comes through. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on some practical guidance for listeners who are
Yeah.
wanting to activate, people who are feeling they are awakening, they are
Yeah.
awakened, and folks are wanting to continue to stay in that activated state of consciousness. What are some practical tips that folks can take away from this conversation moving forward?
Sure. I mean, one is like your diet, right? Like watching what you're eating, not eating a lot of processed stuff, because somebody who used to be 65 pounds heavier and like a lot of that stuff kind of feeds depression. So looking at what you eat, watching what you eat. I'm not advocating meat free or not meat free. I like meat myself, but if somebody's vegetarian, great. Just watch that. Watch what you consume with your eyes, right? How much news are you watching every day? Like, you can be informed, but you don't have to be invested. right? For me, I watch very little news because it changes my vibration. Having a spiritual practice that's meaningful to you, whether that's meditation, and spiritual does not mean religious. The Latin word for religion means to bind, but a spiritual practice is meaningful to you, tuning into source, breathing, having community. If you have a spiritual teacher, or like I'm reading books about meditation and things like that by guys who are like really were there, like they had reached that certain stage. When you read their words, they have an energy to them. Right? There is a high vibration energy just by consuming that with your eyes, or listening to somebody like Muji or Gangaji or a whole bunch of other people on the internet. You're consuming that with your ears. That has a spiritual vibration to it. It's going to lift yours. Anything that can help keep our vibration high. Not speaking ill of others, and that's easier said than done sometimes, but complaining, stuff like that, that's going to take our vibration down. I do it sometimes, but when I do it now, I feel it. I'm like, ooh. It's like eating something that's bad for me. I'm like, that didn't feel good, right?
Yes.
Trying to speak positive things and just take in positive things, speak positive things, be positive things, being gentle with ourselves. I don't want to affirm this, but I have been challenged by that in the past. I affirm, right? Speaking with conscious language, that's a whole nother podcast, like the way we speak, very subtle things, like saying the word want, which means lack in the legal definition, right? If I want this, I'm literally saying I lack this. That's a whole other podcast. But just whatever we can to keep our internal vibration high, physically, spiritually, mentally, and focusing on those things.
I love it. And you'll receive the positive feedback will come through too. And you're putting that out there. You'll be amazed at the synchronicities and the way in which the universe.
Thank you when you hear those or see those synchronicities, right? Like grateful, acknowledging those. Like I saw one. Wow, thank you.
Yes.
Means may I have more, please? Right? Like
yes, exactly.
For little things like air conditioning, man, what a blessing.
Oh, what a blessing.
Water,
seriously.
What a blessing. Being in a swimming pool. Thank you, water, right? Like, little, absolutely. They aren't so little, but like they seem little to us.
I'll add too, for like activation, when the water that you take in, being hydrated is so basic, but it's really important, and it's very easy to become dehydrated. And then also like make sure that you're drinking like really clean water. I like reverse osmosis. Like I like clean water. That's
for sure. And another one that I'm kind of passionate about, and this is where I can get on a soapbox, I got to be careful, but like drinking something in a bottle labeled liquid death.
Yeah, it's a little.
Maybe don't. Well, think of that Masaru Emoto stuff, right? But liquid death got super popular, and I'm like, why would you drink that?
Right.
Because it says liquid death. And he did all these experiments with writing like positive things and changing the crystalline structure of water.
Yeah.
So I got to think the reverse of that's true too, right? Like
let's say you're thirsty and all you have is a can of liquid death. You can like put a piece of paper around it and write love on it and just hold that water for a hot second, and you'll blast
and use your childlike innocence to bless it and transmute it. Like I transmute this into pure divine love water, whatever, and it'll be done.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so then I want you to let folks know if they want to reach out to you, if they want to follow your work. How can folks find you on the interwebs, and any projects or anything you're working on? Please share with my listeners.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the chance to share. I am growing this practice into my life's work. So I have a website. It's www.dondrake.energy. So DONDRAKE.energy. I'm also starting to put out different YouTube videos. My email address is don@dondrake.energy. That's a good way to reach me. Cell phone, I can give you that. Is that cool to give that? I mean, maybe
I think email.
Just email address and web. I got contact forms on there. You guys you can reach me through that. I'm sure you'll put that like at the bottom or whatever. But those are the two best ways to reach me. If you're local in Austin, I teach a lot of classes at Third Eye Meditation Lounge. I'm actually teaching one tonight at 10. It's a shamanic healing circle, and we're doing it that late at night to give people a conscious alternative to going out and drinking, right? Come get high on spirit, right? Come be in a healing circle, send it, receive it. They're really powerful. So
Yeah.
These things like that, and I'll post all those on the events section of my website.
Okay.
Which I'm still building it out right now, but it's there.
Brilliant. Yeah, and all these links are going to be in the description when this episode
Cool.
comes out. I'm going to throw this out on the Rockfin, and then I'm also going to throw it out on the RSS feed. So the links will be in the description. And I would, if you're up for it, I would like to end with another minute of meditation.
Let's do that, and let's even take it to the next level. Let's do this meditation. Anybody who's hearing this or listening this in the quantum field, there is no time and space, so you're here with us right now. So let's all blaze healing for everybody who's touched by this, and even the ones who aren't. Right? Let's send that energy while we're meditating, and then I'll let you be the timer of that, and I'll just be there till you say okay.
Sounds brilliant. All right.
Awesome, my brother. So here we go.
I feel like I'm basking in the glow of some beautiful energy.
Me too. I actually have some tears in my eyes from that. The heart energy opened up so big.
Yeah. Yes. Damn. All right. Well, thank you, listeners. Like the rabbit holes of time and space. You know, Dusty Don and I are right now in this moment, but this moment is going to continue to live on. So, thank you, everyone who's joined in for that. Everyone who will join in the future. Like, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Dusty Don. Man, like.
Thank you too. I this has been such an amazing experience, man. I love it. I found a new brother.
Yes, found a new brother. All right, cool. I'm gonna end the recording, and then I just have one question for you after that.
All
Goodbye,
right.
everybody. Much love.
Bye, y'all. Peace, love.
Wrap me up, lay me down. I need to go to bed now. Wake me up in the morning, else I might not wait. I don't want to see the daylight.
All right, friends. Well, we've ripped, we've skipped, we've popped, we've hopped, we've leaped, we've peeped, we've looped, and we've pooped. Maybe not. Maybe you have. Either way, God bless you. And we have arrived at the end of the show. I want to thank everyone for joining, for sharing some headspace with me, for supporting the podcast. Y'all are the absolute best. I want to give a big shout out to my good brother, Dusty Don Drake, for being an amazing person, for being an amazing mentor. And definitely check out his website, dondrake.energy. dondrake.energy. The link will be in the description. He does one-on-one sessions. He does group sessions. He does online sessions. He's an energy healer. He's an amazing person. And he really has a lot of insights. So consider reaching out to Dusty Don. And in the meantime, everybody, just be good to yourselves. Be beautiful to one another. The Barbarian Noetics podcast is completely listener supported. So consider supporting the podcast. There's so many ways to support. All the links are in the description. We don't have to go through the rigmarole, do we? I don't think so. But if you really want to help me, the best way, honestly, is the PayPal. barbarian.noetics@proton.me on PayPal. That is the best way. And I love and appreciate all y'all. So I'm tired. It's late. I'm going to go to bed. Much love, everybody. Until next time, Little Raven out.